Thank you, choir and musicians, for sharing with us one of Dr. King's favorite hymns. After Jimmie Lee Jackson and James Reeb, there was a third funeral that Dr. King attended in the spring of 1965. It was for Viola Liuzzo, and her story has been very much on my mind and heart this past week in the wake of the recent killing of Renee Good. Like Renee, Viola was a mother who wanted a better world for her children and all children. Like Renee, she was a white woman motivated by her faith to show up and use her social privilege to protect her friends and neighbors from a racist system. And like Renee, she was killed and then publicly vilified by those in power. Viola was a member of the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Detroit. And like Reverend Reeb, she heard Dr. King's call to come to Selma and responded. She drove her car down to Alabama and, working with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, found a role providing transportation and support for the thousands of demonstrators who were walking from Selma to Montgomery. On March 25th, she and Leroy Moten, a young African-American man who has partnered with her as a volunteer, had just dropped off their last passengers when they were overtaken on the road by 4 white men, one of whom shot at Viola in her car, killing her almost instantly and causing the car to veer into a ditch and crash into a fence. Covered in blood that was not his own, Leroy feigned death until the men were gone and he could escape for help. 3 of the men were members of the Ku Klux Klan, and the 4th was an FBI informant who had been working undercover with the Klan for several years. In the days following Viola's death, rumors circulated that she was a drug user who was having an affair with Leroy, that she was mentally unstable and a negligent mother who abandoned her children. The source of these rumors was none other than J. Edgar Hoover himself, the head of the FBI, trying to distract the media from the FBI's failures in Selma. Perhaps you can see why Viola Liuzzo's story has been on my mind and heart this week. When I learned that she was singing "We Shall Overcome" in her car as the Klan members chased her down, I wept. It is not hard to wonder if we've learned anything at all in the 60-plus years between the murders of Viola Liuzzo and Renee Good. It's not hard to wonder if we will ever be able to pull ourselves out of the whirlpool of white nationalism and violent misogyny. It's not hard to despair when we find ourselves here again, in grief and rage and fear, full of frustration that advocating for ideas that seem so simple should be so dangerous. The idea that we should love one another. The idea that human lives have worth and dignity beyond measure of wealth or status or national origin. The idea that peace is preferable to violence. These simple concepts, preached by nearly every religious tradition and established as ideals, if not realities, in the founding documents of this nation, these core values seem self-evident, as the writers of the Declaration of Independence phrased it. But as self-evident as they seem, these ideas that all people should be able to live in equal peace and dignity, it's also evident by now that these dreams will not come to pass without the ongoing and faithful efforts of people who work to make them real in each and every age. This is the ongoing struggle of being human, my friends. This is our work. They may be self-evident, but they are not inevitable. As Dr. King said at James Reeb's memorial, we must be concerned not merely about who murdered him, but about the system, the way of life, the philosophy which produced the murder. If we do not address the underlying philosophies of violence and domination that bring about these tragedies, then we are doomed to repeat them. The Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the civil rights organizing group of which Dr. King was one of the leaders, was established in 1957 with the goal of redeeming the soul of America. The leaders of the conference, they were not starry-eyed utopians. They had experienced firsthand some of the worst things that this country could be. I would have not have blamed them one bit if they thought the national wounds were too deep and the history too traumatic to overcome. But still, they sang that someday these wounds could heal. But still, they worked for redemption. Not just for individuals on a case-by-case basis. Dr. King knew that the likelihood of Bull Connor having a sudden change of heart was slim. He and his colleagues worked for redemption on a larger scale, the redemption of a nation. They were interested in the systems that created the Bull Connors and the Ku Klux Klan and continue to show up as ICE in our current day. They fought to loosen the grip of this nation's murderous past and hold us accountable to those self-evident truths that are also a part of who we are and who we can be. Instead of a culture of cruelty, they advocated for a philosophy of kinship. If Dr. King and his compatriots could hold out hope for the redemption of this nation, for the kinship of all people, then who am I to lose my faith in that possibility as well? So I am sitting with this question: what does it mean to redeem the soul of a nation? As a lifelong Unitarian Universalist, redemption is not a theological concept that I have spent much time with. Forgiveness, repair, reconciliation, healing, these are concepts that resonate with me, but redemption, because I don't believe in that salvation-redemption binary, it didn't really seem like a tool I needed to use much. But reading Dr. King's words and pondering what the Southern Christian Leadership Council meant when they said their purpose was to redeem the soul of a nation, I realized that I had fallen into this trap of thinking of redemption purely in an individualist sense. I had allowed the fundamentalist interpretation of salvation as an individual project to cloud my vision. I was so busy rejecting that individualism that I wasn't picking up on what it means to talk about redemption collectively. In the way King saw it, redemption, like liberation, is a collective project. Individualized redemption is never the way we are going to unwind this system. It will only work if we think bigger than any one person. We can hold hope for every person to have a change of heart, but we cannot wait on that. In his letter from a Birmingham jail, King gave a clear and ringing articulation of the problem inherent in asking people to wait on their oppressors to change before taking action. He said, "Lamentably, it is an historical fact that privileged groups seldom give up their privileges voluntarily. Individuals may see the moral light and voluntarily give up their unjust posture. But as Reinhold Niebuhr has reminded us, groups tend to be more immoral than individuals." The project of redeeming a nation may be harder than the project of redeeming individuals. He goes on to say, "We know through painful experience that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. For years now, I have heard the word wait. This wait has almost always meant never. We have waited for more than 340 years for our constitutional and God-given rights. There comes a time when the cup of endurance runs over and men are no longer willing to be plunged into the abyss of despair. I hope, sirs, you can understand our legitimate and unavoidable impatience." I am impatient. His third book was titled "Why We Can't Wait." The work of saving the soul of a nation is not work that can rest on waiting for the perfect moment. We are in the fierce urgency of now, my friends, and if we are to save democracy, if we are salvage this ideal of becoming a nation that values equality and justice and kinship, then we cannot wait. We may have made some progress toward these ideals since Dr. King's time, but we live today in an America that is under the sway of perhaps the most autocratic leader ever elected by this nation. We are seeing the efforts of this administration to roll back any progress we have made toward justice. And more importantly, efforts to redefine the entire values system of America as a country not founded in the dream of equality, but on the raw exercise of power and domination. These two roots go deep in our American story: the longing for equality and justice and kinship, and the embrace of power and domination and control. Both of these roots are part of the tree of who we are as a nation, and it is our job to nurture and water one and prune the other. Just as Unitarian Universalism is not concerned with salvation after death, but human flourishing while we are alive, so we must concern ourselves with the redemption of the soul of this nation while the heart of democracy is still beating, and not wait until the tyranny is driven the nail into the coffin of the American experiment. We cannot wait. I will not wait for anyone's permission to love my neighbor. I will not ask for anyone's permission to own my own body and being. And I will not stand by while power is used to demand servitude and obedience rather than in the service of justice and compassion. As King said later in that same letter, human progress never rolls in on wheels of inevitability. It comes through the tireless efforts of men willing to be co-workers with God, and without this hard work, time itself becomes an ally of the forces of social stagnation. Now is the time, he said, to make real the promise of democracy and transform our pending national elegy into a creative psalm of brotherhood. He could see the two ways in which we could go: the way that embraced the death of this vision, this dream, or the way that embraced the kinship of all people, and we had a choice as to which path we would follow. We do not have to wait for eulogies to speak truth and name injustice. We should not wait for the death of more good people before demanding we change course. But just as no single person can be allowed to hold back the tide of collective liberation, no single person will redeem us either. That too is our theology. We are not waiting for saviors. We are a prophethood of all people. If redemption is about the soul of the nation, and the nation is something that we create and hold in trust together, then it will take more than just one person's vision to make it happen. James Reeb and Jimmy Lee Jackson and Viola Liuzzo and Renee Good and even Dr. King himself, they remind us of that vision toward which we hope to grow. They inspire us, they motivate us, but they do not redeem us. Our work is much bigger than that. Much bigger than any one person can be held responsible for completing. The arc of history is long, and we are each in our time responsible for bending the parts of it that we touch. I will close with the words from one of Dr. King's last speeches, A Time to Break Silence, delivered at Riverside Church in April of 1967. America, the richest and most powerful nation in the world, can well lead the way in this revolution of values. There is nothing except a tragic death wish to prevent us from reordering our priorities so that the pursuit of peace will take precedence over the pursuit of war. There is nothing to keep us from molding a recalcitrant status quo with bruised hands until we have fashioned it into a brotherhood. There is nothing to keep us from molding a recalcitrant status quo with bruised hands until we have fashioned it into a brotherhood. Our hands and our hearts are bruised. But even with bruised hands, we can build beloved community. Even with bruised hearts, we can show up with love. The times do not demand that we be perfect, but they do demand that we be present in solidarity and kinship with one another as we refuse to let this dream die. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen.